I've had this feeling ever since I've graduated. This kind of compulsion that I have to be rude all the time. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
How do you know when you're an adult? Is it when you've reached a certain age? When you live through something awful? When you learn things about the world? About yourself? What does it even mean to be an adult? And is that truly a satisfying and attainable goal in this world? In Blue Velvet and The Graduate, adulthood is framed as scary, eerie, uncanny, and the traditional adulthood that used to be the dream is neither attainable nor enthralling. I feel these days the general conception of coming-of-age media is framed before college. But being a young adult, the transition from teenager to young adult to adult, has been one of the most transformative and eye-opening experiences of my life. And being able to experience the world of college, hear different views and see things I never even imagined seeing, and coming home to a world that is necessarily the same as I left it, is fascinating and terrifying. Both of these films deeply understand that. They also understand the social plight of womanhood, in the particular women and relationships portrayed throughout. And our female leads force these young men to be confronted with the realities of the world they, as educated, well-off white men, will inevitably inherit. What will Ben and Jeffrey choose to do with that knowledge? And how can we, the viewer, learn from their experiences into the deep unknown of scary adulthood?
Where's my dream?
When you look around and see your dream is gone, maybe that's growing up. And there are many ways in which these films feel like conventional coming-of-age narratives. Watching spots you knew grow and change.
All my old friends are gone.
Learning about yourself and pondering your opportunities in life.
I'm just worried, I guess, about my future. I want it to be different.
The loss of innocence. Blue Velvet is a story about innocence and the impossibility of it. And we'll talk about it more as this video goes on. But both films also take and distort traditional coming-of-age narratives through their deviant plots. I feel we see how this rubs up against normal society much more in Blue Velvet and Jeffrey and Sandy's relationship. Sandy begins this film as a normal teenager, and even if Jeffrey starts this film as a normal young adult, he's still had adult experiences that inform his world past his parents or the town he lives in. Take their Heineken conversation at the Slow Club. He knows what beer he likes, but Sandy's dad only drinks Bud, so that's all she'll drink. Sandy is the one of the two that truly experiences said loss of innocence, seen so nicely on her dad's face at the end of the film after she's witnessed Frank's corpse. Oh fuck, my kid saw that. It's also true in how the plots of everyday high school life weave in with the world of Frank and Dorothy. Like when Jeffrey thinks Frank is running them off the road, but it's really Sandy's boyfriend Mike. He thinks he's the man, the king, the adult, until Dorothy appears, naked, bruised, and crazed, and he realizes how small he is, and how dark the world is, feebly leaving.
I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry.
While Blue Velvet is Curiosity Killed the Cat the movie, The Graduate asks more grounded questions about what it means to become an adult and be thrust into your future. When you have so many options, and none of them seem good for different reasons.
Whole life is such a waste. It's just nothing. Oh no, I'm just, sort of disturbed about things.
In general.
That's right.
What do you want?
I don't know.
It can be nice to have someone tell you exactly what to do. It's comforting, makes you feel like a kid again, to not have to choose, decide, because being an adult is having to make decisions, ones you don't want to make, and ones without good outcomes. And so Benjamin lets Mrs. Robinson tell him to do anything, anywhere, all the time at first, because he doesn't want to have to make a single decision for himself.
I enjoy it. I look forward to it. It's the one thing I have to look forward to.
The other way these films better portray this sense of post-collegiate malaise is through boredom. Jeffrey and Benjamin's arcs are fundamentally defined by this esoteric, young adult, masculine boredom, and it causes them to make brash decisions to satiate that thirst for knowledge, for something, anything at all. Whether it's meandering on walks or aimless, angry driving, Jeffrey is clever. And clever and bored aren't always a good mix when the world is seemingly your oyster.
There are opportunities in life for gaining knowledge and experience. Sometimes it's necessary to take a risk. I'm seeing something that was always hidden. I'm involved in a mystery.
So let's talk about seeing for a little bit. Seeing, looking, observing run consistently throughout Blue Velvet. And to me, that speaks to understanding the truth of adulthood. Jeffrey is an observer. He
wanted to see you.
But Dorothy and Frank are constantly shouting.
Did you fucking look at me?
After his first encounter with Dorothy, he's hit with a hard light of truth and understanding. This is what adulthood is. This is what it means to see. And this is true in different ways in The Graduate as well. Seeing the truth of your community when you learn their secrets. And Benjamin spends a lot of time observing others. What do you have that I don't? How do you do it? And when both men stop looking, when they see the truth and hide from it, they both wear sunglasses.
Why are there people like Frank? Why is there so much trouble in this world?
To answer that question, we have to delve into the dark world of suburbia and conformity.
I just want to say one word to you. Just one word. Plastics.
So I could literally write a thesis on him saying plastics. I actually want it tattooed somewhere and shit. Plastic is the great modern material. It's surrounded by everything. Consumerism, technology, capitalism. This hollow, fake, and incredibly mutable thing, which comes from great strides in technology, that are ultimately meaningless if they kill us through climate change, or make life worthless with cheap consumerism. It sums up so well the hollow, soulless life of giving yourself up to empty, idealistic American tradition, specifically in the job market. Doing something that's bad for yourself and the world. Not just to make ends meet, as these people all have decent sums of money. It's doing something bad that doesn't feel good because it looks nice to everyone else. In a way, it was a prediction. Everything is plastic, we're plastic, the digital age is plastic. And he's right. There are opportunities there. Huge ones, just really evil ones. And if not evil, incredibly lackluster and mediocre ones. College opens your mind as Jeffrey and Ben's minds are being opened. And when you're exposed to things that show you the truth, it can be as disorienting and painful as it is meaningful. We all have our own metaphorical ears, the thing that made it so we can never look back. It's never the same. In recent years, I think COVID, Black Lives Matter, and the genocide in Gaza have been strong forces of radicalization. And even if not fundamentally politically, being exposed to the horrors of the world is a coming-of-age period, a moment where you can never go back. Obviously, the ear is important in the narrative, but it also hangs over Jeffrey, superimposed on his peaceful nighttime walk as it has superimposed itself on his life. And it's an ear, what you hear with, how knowledge and art is ingested through the ears. We see this in the superficial bullshit game show on as Ben goes to pick up Elaine. And really particularly when Jeffrey and Sandy go to the dance. He's a step out of his element, not only in age now, but in maturity. While this is all it is for Sandy. He looks around almost to say, how can anyone think of normal things again? Why aren't we all angry? Jeffrey knows the truth and is stuck in an awkward space. The adults won't talk about it and the kids still haven't seen anything. Or if they have, they don't get the gravity. Whereas in The Graduate, Ben's truth is the unmasking of conformity.
It's like I've been playing some kind of game, but the rules don't make any sense to me. They're being made up by all the wrong people. No. I mean, no one makes them up. They seem to have made themselves up.
Every conversation is an interrogation of conformity. Are you doing it well enough? If not, how are you doing it wrong? Is it threatening or just off-putting? Society dresses him up like a doll. His mom putting him in the jacket. How parents teach their children to conform. He's the diver in the fish tank, forced to dive into the abyss of life for the enjoyment of the people around him, literally pushing him back down. But if they don't know the real him, what does it mean for people to be proud of you if they don't actually care? They don't know the name of the award he won. There's never anyone his age at these events. And in particular, The Graduate does a good job of showing how anxiety-inducing and nauseating what should be simple, easy conversations about future prospects or previous accolades. It's hard to play the game, even when you know the rules. It's tiring. As is the responsibility to give those around you what they want, especially when you don't want it.
They brought me up. They made a good life for me, and I think they deserve better than this.
Especially because so much of his society is built on fake friends. It's necessary to build long-standing relationships on literally nothing, and those can make or break everything. Like how Ben doesn't conform to the standards of the landlord at Berkeley.
I'm not good enough for her to associate with, am I? I'm not good enough to even talk about her, am I? I'm good enough for you, but I'm not good enough to associate with your daughter. That's it, isn't it?
Yes.
The rules of polite society can obfuscate the truth and general human understanding of one another rather than being emotional, using the superficial whims of communication to get over awkward truths. But even at the end, when Ben and Elaine decide not to conform in a brash and impulsive way, they realize their decision will cause them not only pain, but the same dull frustration that got them to this place. Nonconformity conforms. Lynch has always been obsessed with the different, darker underbelly of the world under cover of night. Like in The Joyride, these erratic cuts of streets we've calmly panned down before, seen Jeffrey stroll through, are so different under cover of an evil night. It's a different world. Lynchian suburbia is laughing at you, looking down on you on every chance it gets. It's suffocating you. It's the schizophrenia of America. Which is why I think it's interesting to compare these two films, as I feel that way about The Masses and The Graduate too, but differently. It's high society versus Americana, North versus South, West versus East. Talking about looking down on you, this menacing angle of Ben's father shot from below, basically giving one of the thesis statements of the film.
I think it's a very good thing that a young man, after he's done some very good work, should have a chance to relax and enjoy himself and lie around and drink beer and so on. But after a few weeks, I believe that person would want to take some stock in himself and his situation and start to think about getting off his ass.
It reminds me of a TikTok I once saw. Someone saying, why do they have us do high school like a 9 to 5 and then give us college with classes whenever, long-ass breaks, teachers you can negotiate with, etc., and then expect us to want to jump back into that 9 to 5? But that's what his dad is saying here. Not only do you have to do it, but you have to want it. Why are you resting, allowing yourself to ponder your future? No. Capitalism now, dummy. You know how you have to work forever and never stop until you retire? Why the fuck aren't you dying to go do that right now? When The Graduate was made, the 50s were really only 10, 15 years ago. Of course, nuclear families, perfect jobs, perfect kids, picket fence is the end-all be-all for the elders in Ben's life. It's a promise that is still ringing true. America is prospering, and in some places, the worker really is getting a part of it. No wonder courtship could sometimes still be more focused on the end than the means.
He said he thought we'd make a pretty good team.
Oh no, he said that?
Blue Velvet functions a little differently, though. As we'll talk about later, Blue Velvet takes much from the culture of the 50s, but it doesn't center itself in it. The look of a Lynch film is largely shaped by Lynch's unique relationship with time, and the fact that he feels no fidelity to historical accuracy in regard to period styles. In Lynch's realm, America is like a river that flows ever forward, carrying odds and ends from one decade into the next, where they intermingle and blur the dividing lines we've invented to mark time. Blue Velvet is set in some indeterminate period where time has collapsed in on itself. And when you start to look at the world with newly radicalized eyes, or at least newly skeptical ones, troubling notions about men or masculinity arise specifically among cultural concerns. Are men a monolith? Is any man capable of change?
You're like me.
Both films try to deconstruct many masculine archetypes, and they best succeed in doing so by having their protagonists try and fail to appropriate an ideal traditional masculinity. Benjamin has appropriated the methods and surface elements of adulthood. The suit, the haircut, the bag, the posture.
To bring this boy out here, all right? Now, wait a minute. Oh, let me amend that. To bring this young man out here.
But that doesn't make him one. Whether it's the somewhat macho tone Jeffrey tries to add to his voice as he sprays down Dorothy's apartment, Ben adopting smoking and placing his tall boy beer in a particularly provocative place.
Heineken? Fuck that shit! Pabst Blue Ribbon!
Or even his smoking and drinking alone in the bar. He's trying and failing to appropriate masculinity, even in its negative, loneliest forms. Of course, take Ben's first date with Elaine. He won't wait for her, he takes her to the most humiliatingly machismo place he can think of, a strip club. And while I think it's torture for him,
I'm not like this. I hate myself like this.
It is, at the same time, his best attempt at weaponizing his masculinity to use in this game with Mrs. Robinson. And when Jeffrey tries to adopt what he thinks is positive masculinity and does what he's supposed to do, he stands up for Dorothy. Is he expecting to be met as a hero? What does he think will happen? Because it just ends up causing them both more pain, with Frank literally sexually harassing, then beating the shit out of him. I often feel Blue Velvet is the film equivalent of the men will take acid and realize empathy exists and think they invented it thing. Like, Jeffrey is that to a T. Still, I find one of the most interesting elements of each film's understanding of masculinity comes from their obsession with 50s car films. They both feel like dark subversions of the 50s hot rod greaser. Car chases, joyrides, fast in red cars with roofs down. It's this genre born out of a clean-cut, but still edgy, idealistic, masculine golden age. As Lynch said, it's a 50s thing, born out of the 50s. Jeffrey and Ben feel predatory, holding their masculinity and feigned maturity over Sandy and Elaine's heads, using their cars, their driving as another element of control, knowingly or not. And Frank does this as well. He takes Jeffrey for a joyride. We've all cruised around with friends and stopped at another friend's house to get a couple of beers. And there are certainly groups of young men who might get together and do drugs, do petty crimes, hook up with girls. Even when it's insidious, it's still juvenile. Which is why it's so terrifying to go on this dark journey into the unknown Frank seemingly believes is that, a pastime for high schoolers. But ether, rape, kidnapping, physical assault, it might be just a little different. Still, it all falls under this rampant masculine selfishness, an ability to make everything theirs, manifest destiny. Another way we see this idealization of masculinity is in the subversion of these almost Marlboro Man cowboy tropes in Frank. He wears the blue velvet like a bandana and wears a bolo tie in many scenes. And Jeffrey killing him at the end is a final duel.
I shoot when I see the whites of the eyes.
True in general when it comes to the almost boyish, cops and robbers-like way criminals are framed when not under cover of night. The man in the yellow suit is so noir, so comic book, so Clue game, but the fact that he's an insider is perfect. Hiding in plain sight, the corruption literally highlighted. But I think masculinity is needfully criticized when it comes to the ways Jeffrey and Benjamin intentionally and unintentionally use their gender to dominate the situation, and how they've societally been taught to do so. Both men treat the women in their lives with exceedingly less care, and all the while assume they deserve them more and more. Not only is it callous, but it's objectifying. Jeffrey clearly sees Sandy as another prize, another mystery to win.
You're a mystery. I like you.
And it's especially creepy when he forces himself on her in the diner.
Jeffrey, don't, please.
And when Benjamin treks off to Berkeley to snatch up Elaine, the insinuation he can marry her without her knowledge shows he sees her as nothing more than a trophy on a quest of personal satisfaction and fulfillment. This is true of the individually brash decisions both men make throughout the films. Things only young, educated white men with that level of entitlement could bring. It's true of Jeffrey peeing in Dorothy's bathroom, a marking of his territory in a way. True of Benjamin yelling in the library so everyone will see Elaine isn't responding. True of his ultimate act of nonconformist dominance at the wedding. And it's true of Jeffrey's entire scheme to infiltrate Dorothy's life and make Sandy complicit.
I mean, it sounds like a good daydream, but actually doing it's too weird. Jeffrey, you shouldn't do this.
Why not?
Because it's crazy. And dangerous. My God, I should have never told you.
Which is a larger point of difference in the ways the men and women interact with the world. For men, it's good until proven bad, whereas for women, it's the opposite. True again of Dorothy's response to Jeffrey, how Sandy is afraid of how Mike will respond. But because Jeffrey is from the group of people that own the world, he assumes he can too, eager to try his luck each time he gets away.
I don't know if you're a detective or a pervert.
Well, it's for me to know and you to find out.
How does sex interfere with masculinity and the coming of age? How does voyeurism and sexual deviance make Jeffrey and Ben feel more and less like men and more and less like adults? We can't answer that question without first understanding the women in their lives. In both films, we see womanhood contrasted through the two women the man has relationships with. One older, sexualized, and damaged, and one young, pure, and forced to take the mother role the older woman should be taking. While the girl is resistant sexually, the older woman is pressing and dominant. And because the man in their life decided to take on adult matters, the girls are forced to grow up and learn the truth of the world as well. The older women are not traditional adults, not like the other older women in their lives, mothers, teachers, neighbors, and this deviance is attractive. A woman who is both an adult and not. We get a lot of Madonna whore and incestual vibes here, as well as women feeling and being responsible for things they had no say in. Although Jeffrey doesn't know Dorothy or Sandy beforehand, whereas Ben knows the Robinsons closely. Dorothy and Mrs. Robinson are commanding in their presences, in an almost masculine way because of how domineering they can be. And both films use their characters to explore a variety of power dynamics, both sexually and not. I think this cycle of power is seen really nicely the first night Jeffrey and Dorothy meet. Jeffrey has invaded her personal space, is inside her home, behavior of an aggressor, even though he's there because he thinks she's an aggressor in the case with the ear. But when Dorothy gets a hold of him and uses her knife, making him get undressed, she presents as the attacker in the situation, the older, predatory female. It shifts back and forth so quickly and violently from oppressor to oppressed. As Isabella Rossellini said about the role, how would I seduce him? How would I surprise him with my behavior? How would I portray a woman who is a victim, but also a perpetrator of crimes against herself? Until Jeffrey sees Frank, and he learns exactly where that aggression came from.
Don't you look at me, fuck!
She's mirroring him, as a defense mechanism. And when it comes to power plays, Mrs. Robinson is a genius.
Don't get up.
She knows how to make Ben useful so he doesn't go insane.
I mean, should I just stand here? I mean, I don't know what you want me to do.
Knows how to emasculate him, but remind him just enough of how young he is, and that's when he's able to take the power. Although she'll always have the power in their relationship when they're together, and have sex with her without being scared. Up until a certain point when Elaine comes into the picture, Benjamin is passive and submissive in basically every way in their relationship. And Jeffrey follows Dorothy's orders too, trying to take care of her as much as he can in her confused state. But sex is a turning point for both of these men, and I think Jeffrey hitting Dorothy and the cut of jumping into bed with Mrs. Robinson are the same moment in a way. An acceptance of a new understanding of what it means to be wanted and to be powerful. Certain aspects of sex are troubling. The way it's used as power, or the way it takes the form of perversions that exploit other people, said Lynch.
Are you a bad boy?
What do you mean?
Do you want to do bad things?
And their sexual relationships offer not only the younger men power, but the women as well. Take how passive Mrs. Robinson is with her husband versus with Benjamin. She enjoys the power she holds over him. like his face when he first sees her naked with her casual, smug demeanor. The first time we see Mrs. Robinson, she doesn't care, and that's attractive. Ben wants something different. Her lack of adhering to these gauche norms is that something different, and she feels that with him even more than he does with her. Ben tries to bicker with her like a married couple, but she talks him down like a child, and he apologizes like a child. And when their relationship is over, she takes the power over him and uses it to spin the narrative on its head by claiming rape, that she was the weak one after all. I still think there are genuine positives in the relationship between Dorothy and Jeffrey. There's someone new, but somewhat safe to explore new things with. Dorothy is an outsider, a foreign woman, and her namesake is Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. And this was true before she was sucked into the dark underbelly of a world run by Frank. When we first see the kid stuff, the general, expressive unreality of a character like Dorothy immediately becomes so tangible, so real, and so much worse than whatever Jeffrey was expecting when he opened that door. But he learns a dark truth about himself, that he likes it. As Rossellini herself said about the role, sometimes physical pain can interrupt psychological anguish. But the slow-mo, the succumbing not just to what she thought was her desire, but what is the desire of all man? Another quote from Lynch: "Sex is a doorway to something so powerful and mystical, but movies usually depict it in a completely flat way. Being explicit doesn't tap into the mystical aspect of it either. These things are hard to convey in film because sex is such a mystery."
Have you disease in me now?
I think both films have fundamentally fatalistic views on the impact of women's sexual autonomy, and the ways it's continuously exploited by men. Like how, once Mrs. Robinson stops being sexually available to Benjamin, she looks ugly to him. No makeup, ratty hair from the rain, just in a robe. Both films take on the worldviews of their protagonists, and thus a male gaze. Take the gags around the start of The Graduate. How one guy is talking to Ben about the chicks his car can pick up, and that's the car he drives Mrs. Robinson home in. Or when Mr. Robinson says,
"Sow a few wild oats. Take things as they come."
And Mrs. Robinson walks down. A complex woman can still be objectified. And like I said before, both films have complicated relationships with motherhood, especially in slightly incestuous tones. Ben's mother and Mrs. Robinson look incredibly similar, and Mrs. Robinson unbuttons him where his mom dressed him, allowing naked self-truth to come out rather than conformity. And of course, all of Frank's mommy, baby, daddy, whatever the fuck that is. But fundamentally, mothers are passive, tokens of society to primp their families into being who they should be, until that opportunity is taken away from them in someone like Dorothy's case. Apparently, Lynch wanted Helen Mirren to play the role of Dorothy, who declined, but said Dorothy should have a child, and that made perfect sense. The complicated relationship Mrs. Robinson has to Elaine is evident too, as she is uninterested in being alive as she's forced to conform, as a woman, as a mother, in her marriage, even after a while uninterested to play the role of the older lover. She got pregnant and was forced to get married, stop being a student or her own woman, and she is what society makes you when it beats out any ounce of self-determination or passion. Her face when she says she majored in art. Ugh. She does a little thing with her eyebrows that's so heartbreaking. There's the girl, there's the dream, the chance to be herself still waiting in there, hiding. And it was easy to hide when no one asked. But when someone cares, what are you supposed to do? Keep hiding or allow yourself to feel, with all the risks that entails? And she does neither. I think now is a good time to remind you I've been calling her Mrs. Robinson because that's all she is in the film. Never a first name, only her husband's. So how do the films portray the other women in their lives, the opposites, the young ones, Sandy and Elaine? As Sandy appears, the music swells. She's a young blonde in a pink dress with the big blue eyes, this idealized picture of innocence. And when, at the strip club, the pure Elaine is tainted with the stripper, juxtaposed behind her crotch specifically, Sandy has to say,
"Just so the record is kept straight, though, I love Mike."
When they first meet alone, and Jeffrey loves to act gentlemanly for her, opening doors and moving her out of the way from catcallers or her bad boyfriend. Laura Dern said, "My character isn't part of the darkest aspects of the story. Everyone talks about the violence and cruelty in David's films, but he's also a profound believer, and that's where the characters I've played for him have hung out. That's the part of David I have access to as an actor." But beyond this duality around purity, they're both related to the other woman in the film in some way, entangled with Ben and Jeffrey's stories of radical self-acceptance.
Didn't my father tell you not to talk about it?
And so the men transfer over to them from the other woman once reality sets in over sexual fantasy. And they are the two couples that make it to the end of the film. But do any of them really love each other? Should they really be together? Sandy slaps Jeffrey, forced to be violent too, and immediately forgives him as she is such a teenager. But their relationship is somewhere that I seemingly really disagree with Lynch's interpretation of his own film, as their love feels as hollow as Ben and Elaine's. Elaine and Mrs. Robinson are two sides of the same coin, almost the same woman at different periods of her life, before and after the woman was punished for the sins of the man, before they feel responsible for things they're not responsible for.
He put this disease in me.
This is where Sandy realizes things are much worse, real and adult. How she looks at them with confusion, disgust, curiosity, and understanding all at once as she backs away. Just that fucking image of the two of them, and poor Sandy's contorting face. It's too much. It's too adult for her. It's so frightening. Of course, how scary and weird to come from a night of dancing with the guy who's been so enamored with you as of late. What a betrayal, not just by him, but by life itself. And fuck Jeffrey for going so silent and passive when it all comes to a head. Why can't you own up to your secrets when you've been finding out everyone else's? These two women, Dorothy and Sandy, totally at odds. Old, young, dark, light, naked, clothed, traumatized, pure, etc., etc. That's the crux of this. In between them is the truth. That's America. That's what Jeffrey has learned as a student of the world, of modern society. And after all this, now he can't look. What was it all for then? The heroic gestures, the charm, the schemes, the pain? If you can't look Sandy in the eye now, let her see who you truly are. It's a dual betrayal.
I love you. I couldn't watch that.
Within the joyride scene, though, Jeffrey is being treated like a woman. He's understanding what it's like to live as a woman in a male-dominated society upfront and empathetically for the first time. Up until that point, he was genuinely sympathetic to the plight of Dorothy, but obviously never had to experience what her life had actually been like. I think once they start to beat him and laugh, you start to see him as an object and a puppet, and you realize that's how women are treated everywhere. All the time, by all of these men, including someone like Jeffrey himself.
It's a strange world, isn't it?
And so we come to the scary adulthood portion of things. Adulthood is portrayed as bad, in their towns and in their times, something to fear one's transformation towards. In The Graduate, we see caricatures of the elderly. These last laugh homage shots and the tight shaky cam portray their swarming. So many of the scenes with the parents' friends feel like horror films, literally a zombie apocalypse of upper middle class couples. Made no more apparent than at the end of the film, looking on with confusion and frustration, Ben made Demon Slayer, literally pushing them, beating people with the cross. High society is demonic, devil material. And there's a similar feeling to the eeriness of Community when it comes to Frank's use of the word neighbor.
Oh, you're from the neighborhood. Your neighbor.
What a word to sum up the underbelly of suburbia. We all have neighbors, people we should be more communally involved with but aren't, who we used to be. But also, what if those people are evil, dark? What are your neighbors hiding only feet away from you? Sometimes only a wall in between in apartments. Frank highlights and destroys the connotations of the word itself. After Frank hits Jeffrey, he says,
"Be polite!" Here's to Ben.
You must bow to your elders, respect them, become them, no matter what they do. That is your path. No matter who they are, it's all the same. It's not even ironic Frank says be polite. The most evil people still have rule systems they adhere to, and actually those systems may be one of the reasons they are what they are. One of my favorite visual themes that I picked up on even when I was really little was the framing in the aquarium and all these general visual symbols of animal life. It's actually quite similar to the really great stuff in Mean Girls. The juxtaposition of human and animal culture shows how maybe the civilized human world actually functions a lot more like an ecosystem of wildlife than it seems, all intertwined with the general water symbols and drowning metaphors. Mrs. Robinson poses in front of giant jungle-esque plants behind them, wearing zebra print, cheetah print, covered in the tiger blanket. And of course, Ben accompanies Elaine to the zoo, looking at the monkeys and the lonely gorilla. The other theme visually in The Graduate is the constant blocking of views, of perspectives, of understanding. People are constantly getting in the way of the frame, misunderstood and literally blocked from view at the hotel. Mr. Robinson pouring him scotch when he said bourbon. The way his dad literally invades the space of the frame, of us the audience as well as Benjamin, blocking everything. From the first shot, Benjamin is already opposed, as younger, eyes up and out and glistening with promise and apprehension, where everyone else's are just glazed over. Despite their criticisms of the world, both films understand what that promise meant, and how others who still buy into it misunderstand what that means.
I wish I was that age again. You'll never be young again.
Both films portray a connected community of adults, one who chooses their futures and maintains conformity. Jeffrey also learns they're not to be trusted when he sees the man in the yellow suit is a part of the corruption of the police. He can't tell Sandy's father of anything. The policeman, the supposed authority, capital A adult. No one can help. The systems you thought, you were taught to think would help, can't. No one is there to save you, so save yourself. And Mrs. Robinson is the effects of this incarnate, the broken shell which the systems of adulthood have fragmented her into. She is adulthood, the truth of it. So how do we read the ending of Blue Velvet here? This specifically ideal 1950s America good ending, but one where the ant looks at the robin and says,
I could never eat a bug.
Even here, in this beautiful, idealized version of things, she points to probably the most grotesque feature of the entire landscape. Obviously, the robins aren't real, but does that mean Jeffrey is stuck in a delusion of goodness that can never be pure now knowing the truth? Or hope for a better world, one where it can be true, even if it's not now? Are we supposed to yearn for this world? Or leave it behind? Is it only for dreams? Is this surreality or reality? What does an ideal mean? Ben and Jeffrey must reconcile with being promised a world that does not exist, and seeing the truth of that. And the curse of a young adult is spite.
Hey, it's too late! Not for me!
I haven't said it yet, but something about these films feels inherently neurodivergent to me. This fundamental confusion of the why of social norms, while Benjamin generally has problems with the how as well. Near the end, Jeffrey literally closes the door of this life, only to recede back in the darkness when Frank returns. It's hard to know. And The Graduate and Blue Velvet portray looking, sensing, knowing, understanding, curiosity, and truth so vividly. And its conclusions about the consequences of truth are fatal.
What are you so scared of?
I'm not scared, Mrs. Robinson.
Then why do you keep running away?
Benjamin is afraid of what people think of him, but he can't conform. He can't fully deviate either. Everyone's expectations and eyes pressed on him, suffocating, drowning. After my first semester in college, I came home for winter break a changed person and obsessed with Bookends, the Simon & Garfunkel album that features the completed track of Mrs. Robinson. Songs like Old Friends, Overs, America. Suddenly I could understand and relate to things that felt too adult in the past. Hearing and imbuing my life with this music made me feel more adult. But I was only 18, and I had no idea what was coming in my life, and in the world to force the wool off my eyes. How hard it's been, and how hard it will be. but how glad I am to know. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm very interested to hear people's opinions and experiences in the comments. I'd love to hear how these films related to your coming of age if they did. I'm diving pretty quickly into another 2-film comparison, but this time it's going to be 2 Schrader flicks, Taxi Driver and First Reformed. So make sure to like and subscribe to stick around if you're interested in that. Make sure to leave any video recommendations or ideas in the comments for me too if you have those. And as always, I'll see you next time.